Ernest Levin. What we'll find out is Ernest is a very, I would say, educated man, because not by certification, but the thought that he could think for himself and he could also see what was going on in the events and put things together. Start out with when he was in elementary school. I remember the day that Hitler was elected chancellor in 1933. I was in the Volksschule, and all my classmates were walking around the aisles of the classroom saying, "Hail Hitler, Hail Hitler, Hail Hitler." Of course, Hail Hitler had never been mentioned in my home, so I was completely floored, and in response, I went and said, "Freiheit," or freedom, a slogan of the Socialist Party. They pounced on me. And in response to the Christenbach and other Jews in the businesses, he said, "You had many stores with the big signs, Juden unerwünscht, Jews not wanted. At least 40% of them had these signs." But he also says, just because the stores had these signs, there was also good people. A grocery store run by an old man and his wife. By the time he was already in his late 60s, he knew my family and my grandmother. I would make it a point to go to his store just before he closed. He would sneak me all kinds of things. When nobody was in the store, he would whisper, "How is your grandmother?" If I was alone in the store, he always gave me a little something, a little extra bread or kerosene for the Bunsen burner, since we couldn't use electricity or gas. And that's one thing that we'll find in his story is he says there was a lot of bad people, but there was also good. We need to remember that. This is a response to a letter he received. He later found out that it was from one of his childhood friends. I never knew who sent it or how they got it out. He told me in this letter that he was near Treblinka, and translated from German to English. "Here's a camp where the people are being treated with chemicals." I was thinking, what the heck does he mean? Therefore, when he found out later on, obviously, what that meant, he said, "Therefore, I would have known 4 weeks. I would have known 4 weeks before I was arrested that something was going wrong." Then we find out later on, he gets a little more angry at the fact that when people say they didn't know, he calls her out on it. Obviously, the Germans knew that these Jews were being transported away. Some of them benefited by going to the apartment that they were sealed and stealing whatever they could steal. No questions were ever asked. Trains would take off and come back empty. Where are these people? This question was not asked by the Germans. The Germans knew in a way that something was happening. He describes that in his town of, I think it was Breslau or Berluscu, I'm not sure. There was 45,000 Jews that were just gone. Obviously, that's a large number that you should know that something's going on. I don't care that they say today that we didn't know about it. Bullshit. We didn't know in detail that what was happening. They probably didn't know that there were gas chambers in Auschwitz or in Treblinka, but they knew that the Jews were vanishing. He talks about when he was, I think just 16 when he got into the camp. He said he was lucky enough to get into Auschwitz III, which was a work camp. He said it was run by civilians, mostly recruited from IG Farben. Workers, master craftsmen, foremen, they were the ones who in fact ran it. They saw these living corpses marching daily into their territory in commandos as slave workers. He then talks about, towards the end of it, when the death marches, when they were moving people out of the camp and putting them on trains. The cars on these trains by that time were cattle cars. When people looked down these trains from overpasses, they saw what must have been the most indescribable sight. Car after car passed by in which there were strange creatures and striped things packed together like animals. He also talks about how when they were going through Germany and Austria, he would look up and see people looking over the overpass with no emotion. He said later on, he felt like it was more of a guilt from what they saw. But when they got into Czechoslovakia, when he looked up and saw people, they were crying because they knew what was happening. And this is the end of the last paragraph in this thing. The question of how the Germans behaved during the war and before the war cannot be answered in black and white. They behaved like Germans. There were good ones and there were bad ones. There was a vast mass of indifferent ones. The vast majority were, if not indifferent, collaborators. And to finish off, I think this chapter could have been an hour-long class. I really recommend that you guys read this section because it goes into more detail than what I put into here about how there are differences between the Germans that just took what was going on and the Germans that actually stood up and did something.